Let's take a closer look now at the aftermath to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's first one-on-one meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden. Our national affairs editor, Chris Hall, is going to be with us in just a moment or two, but we want to bring you a few moments that stand out from yesterday. Firstly, Joe Biden calling on China to free the two Canadians, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig.
Human beings are not bartering chips. You know, we're going to work together until we get their safe return.
First time Biden has made that call publicly, taking Canada's side in what is arguably the most difficult diplomatic dispute facing the Trudeau government. We'll talk about that in a second. And then there's this moment, the Prime Minister praising the new tone in Canada-U.S. relations while taking a swipe at Biden's predecessor in the White House.
Thank you again for stepping up in such a big way on tackling climate change. U.S. leadership has been sorely missed over the past years.
Now, if that remark wasn't enough, the big smile seems to reflect the new tone, as I said, in Canada-U.S. relations. And why don't we make that a starting point? Chris Hall, our national affairs editor, with us from Ottawa to look at things. Great to see you, as always. Thank you, Chris.
Good morning, Heather.
Because it was a virtual summit, we couldn't see the body language for ourselves, I guess, but it did seem to be a sea change in terms of the tone and tenor of the relationship. Why don't we start there?
Yeah, there's no question that after 4 years of working with Donald Trump, here is a perhaps more predictable partner in Joe Biden and the Democratic administration he leads. Clearly, they are much more closely aligned on issues around climate change, around even national security in North America, revamping NORAD, and obviously on an inclusive recovery, if I can use that term, because that's the one that they use to make sure that there are no systemic barriers for women and other minorities to be able to take part in whatever economic recovery follows the pandemic. And of course, COVID-19, a more coordinated response, working together to try and deal with it across North America. Some of the specifics not yet there. It is a roadmap. That's what they're calling it. It points in a general direction, Heather, but there are no specific destinations here about, for example, would the U.S. give Canada priority access to vaccines produced in the United States? That isn't in this communique yet. And certainly around Buy American, one of the more difficult topics they face, no commitment to give Canada a waiver from those priorities that would be given to U.S. manufacturers for government's $600 billion worth of government purchases every year in the United States.
Okay, so a roadmap. So if I was to ask you what was the payoff for Canada, what did Canada get, to be, colloquial about it?
Yeah.
Nothing definitive yet from that initial discussion.
Well, there clearly is, as you painted in that first clip, a commitment from Biden to work with Canada to win the release of the two Michaels, Kovrig and Spavor. Obviously, nothing specific about Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive who was arrested by Canada on behalf of the United States in an extradition warrant, which is a key aspect here. Not sure what Joe Biden would do. But there is a tangible thing that's going to happen today, Heather, a climate meeting between John Kerry, the climate czar in John Kerry's government, and Jonathan Wilkinson, the environment minister here. The two will meet this afternoon to discuss ways forward on this new cooperative approach on climate change for the continent. And I anticipate some of the indications are that Canada will announce a more ambitious target for 2030 to reduce emissions beyond the 30% below 2005 levels as a sign of the willingness of these two governments to try and really put climate change at the forefront and to lead by example. So look for that later this afternoon.
Okay, so there are moves and there are substantial things to come. And yes, we knew that meeting was coming today, so it sounds like there will be some definitive talk on targets and emissions as part of that discussion. Can I just come back to the China point for just a moment, that first ever public call from Joe Biden for China to release the two Michaels? Interestingly, Chris, we got from the Beijing Foreign Ministry press briefing, or the daily briefing, a brief statement that your colleague Philip Ling has translated for us. This is from the spokesperson. We have repeatedly made our position clear on the cases of the relevant Canadian citizens Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor have been prosecuted on suspicion of engaging in crimes that endanger China's national security. China's judicial sovereignty allows no interference. So nothing specifically to acknowledge the new support from Joe Biden, but just how important is his voice on this and U.S. public support on the issue?
I think it's extremely important in the sense that it is the first opportunity Joe Biden has had in a meeting like this with Justin Trudeau to raise this issue unbidden. Clearly, Donald Trump's former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, had talked about the two Michaels as well. The difficulty here is the linkage. The Chinese deny that there's any connection to the arrest of Meng Wanzhou, who is still being detained in her home in Vancouver. So it's not clear exactly what Joe Biden, as I said earlier, intends to do here. But the fact that he raised it and gave his unwavering support to the position that the two are being used as bartering chips in the negotiations around Meng Wanzhou is clearly a signal that the United States is going to continue to pressure to work with Canada and other allies, for that matter, to try to win their release. They've been in custody there for more than 2 years, so it's clearly dragging on, and it's difficult to see how this would be resolved without some strong U.S. engagement. And certainly Joe Biden's words are a comfort to Canada that they will have that support in the days and weeks ahead.
Okay. Finally, I'd like to ask basically what now? I mean, you mentioned no exemptions, no waivers secured on the Buy American policy, the executive order that Joe Biden signed that right now keeps Canadian companies out of those lucrative U.S. government contracts. So nothing from that specifically yesterday. What are the flashpoints ahead that weren't acknowledged yesterday, Chris?
Well, I think that's clearly the big one. There is the hint, the suggestion from the administration that as they review Joe Biden's executive order giving priority to U.S. suppliers, that there may be a waiver at some point in the future for Canada. Remember, this is really important. Canada has continued to press through state governors and in Congress the importance of the integrated supply chains between the two countries, that really to have no access to Canadian companies would be very difficult on both sides of the border, driving up prices. They continue to make those kinds of points. The other one is on vaccines. Obviously, Joe Biden is elected by Americans, and his first duty is to ensure that they are safe and their health is guaranteed. So the vaccines that are being produced in the United States are being solely directed at this stage to Americans to make sure that they have shots. But I was told by a Canadian official that the Biden administration understands the importance of moving in lockstep with its North American partners, which should include Mexico as well as Canada, to ensure that vaccines are widely available, because the only way you reopen the borders to non-essential travel, the only way you can get the economy back on full roar is if there is a coordinated effort to try and make sure that both countries are vaccinated, all countries in North America are vaccinated at roughly the same pace. So an acknowledgement there. We'll be watching to see at what point, if Joe Biden comes around to the view that there is an opportunity here to ensure that its neighbors, particularly Canada, has access to U.S.-produced vaccines. Okay,
Chris, thank you for all of that. And just before you go, again, to restate that meeting coming up, John Kerry and John Wilkinson, the Environment Minister, here, 1 o'clock this afternoon. And again, the headline is, to make sure I got it correct, that our viewers got it correct, Canada's going to announce new and aggressive emissions targets beyond the 30% below 2005 levels. That's what we should watch for today. That is it. Chris, thank you, as always. Our national affairs editor, Chris Hall, from Ottawa.